Hello and welcome to another episode of the Energy Exchange podcast. My name's Jarrod Leak and I'm the CEO of the Australian Alliance for Energy Productivity, A2EP, it's much easier. Joining me today is Suzie Jakobovits from Jemena, and we're going to go explore the world of biomethane. Suzie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jarrod.
Let's kick off with Jemena and your role here. Take us through it.
So I'm the General Manager of Renewable Gas here at Jemena. Jemena's an energy transport business. You know, we own the poles and the wires for electrons and the pipes for molecules, and we move them around the country. So being involved in both gas and electricity, we've got this really great, unique perspective about the energy transition from a whole of system perspective.
Let's dive in then. You mentioned renewable gas.
Yes.
I hear renewable gas, I hear biomethane, biogas, landfill gas. Please take us through there, what the meanings are there.
And how they all relate to each other.
Yeah.
Well, renewable gas is really that umbrella term that sits over the types of gases that can be remade continuously. So that includes biomethane, which we'll talk about. That includes hydrogen. It includes synthetic methane. So you can continually create it. Biogas and biomethane, they both come from organic materials, so biological-based materials, plants and animals. When this organic material decomposes and rots, it lets off a gas. That's biogas. Now, depending on the source of it, it can have within it methane, carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen. In order to use that gas in homes and businesses, we actually need to take out some of those other gases and what we call contaminants. So we upgrade it. So you take the biogas, you upgrade it to biomethane, and biomethane is that one-for-one replacement with natural gas in the pipes that people use in their homes and businesses. So that's the difference between biogas and biomethane. Landfill gas is just one of those sources of biogas. So landfill is where we throw out those household organics and decomposes and lets off a biogas. So that's just one of the sources.
But if we're burning this, that's creating CO2. So yes. How is this getting ahead in decarbonisation?
Well, so what it does is it actually replaces natural gas. So if we're actually able to take that biomethane and inject it into the gas network, we can stop taking the gas out of the ground, which is adding emissions to the atmosphere. Using the organic biogas, they sort of had a natural carbon cycle. And so we're displacing the natural gas and we're just using the gas and burning it in the home or in the business as part of that natural cycle. And
I understand, because if we just left this on the ground, these organics, they're going to turn into methane and CO2 anyway.
They'll turn into methane, which is 29 times or 28 times more potent than CO2. CO2, it turns into CO2 when you burn it.
So we're taking a natural process and rather than methane going straight up, we're going to capture it.
We're going to capture it and use it.
Okay, great. Let's talk about what's going on now. How much are we producing in Australia and where are we at with that?
So around Australia, there's about 240 biogas facilities. So there is a lot of biogas that's being developed. A bit under half of it, I think, is flared, so just wasted. The rest of it's being used to generate electricity and some heat for just use on site. So just sort of individual plants. There's only one biomethane facility that's upgrading that biogas and injecting it into the network, and that's in Sydney. There's a project between, yes, it is our project, between Jemena and Sydney Water at their Malabar wastewater treatment plant. So that's the first project. It's a demonstration project to prove that this works in an Australian context. And but there are other projects that are under development. There's one under construction in South Australia, and we know of a number of other projects that are moving towards that sort of final investment decision.
Okay, so plenty of biogas out there, a fair bit being wasted at the moment, and a fair bit using for electricity, which maybe that solar and wind batteries can do that. Yeah. What is the potential? How much biomethane can we get?
It's a great question because it's the biggest concern that we hear from customers, from policymakers, that there's potentially not enough of it, so why even bother? So Bluenemy, a consultancy, did a study last year. They did a report that looked at the biomethane feedstock potential right across Australia, and it was really eye-opening in that they showed that there is enough feedstock potential on the east coast of Australia to technically meet 96% of current usage. So there's a lot of feedstock potential. Not all of it, though, can economically come to market yet. Some of it will be quite expensive to bring to market. So they then looked at, okay, well, given the right policy settings, what is that supply potential? The report says somewhere between sort of 130 and 300 petajoules is available to meet commercial and industrial usage of about 230 petajoules across the East Coast. So there's definitely enough there, but that supply potential doesn't include the scale up that we're starting to see in Europe. So it doesn't include growing energy crops on contaminated lands or marginal lands. It doesn't include changed farming practices where in between two harvests, a farmer can actually make some more money by doing an energy crop. And by growing an energy crop, not only do they make more money, it actually helps retain nutrients and moisture in the soil, so it benefits the farm. So this is what we're seeing overseas. There's also studies being done overseas that you can inject hydrogen into that anaerobic digester, which creates the biogas, and it's actually increasing output by up to 70%. So the scale-up potential from that technology, the potential's very large on that. So I don't think supply is going to be a problem.
So we've got the supply. We're ready to go there. The technologies drop in.
Yep.
So, okay, cost then. What's the deal with the cost then? Is it economical? Are we ready for exchanging there?
Yeah, look, like all new markets where you don't have the supply chains, in place yet, all those, the early movers, there will be a higher cost. The other thing that will make that cost higher is that when you produce biomethane, there are two byproducts. There's biogenic CO2 and there's digestate, which is green fertiliser. The markets don't yet exist for these products. They need to be created. But for a producer, if they're able to generate revenue from that, it reduces the cost of the biomethane that they sell to customers. So that entire sort of value chain is not mature yet. So at the moment, it is more expensive and it does require some government support in order to get moving.
And we are seeing government support come in, certainly in New South Wales?
In New South Wales. New South Wales are definitely the front runners here, and we saw them announce policy back in November of late last year, which has stimulated the New South Wales market, and we're now starting to see projects moving.
And that's going to bring the economics
yes, absolutely.
much closer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The economics are improving.
Yep.
And they will only improve as the supply chain gets there. So what industries, what sectors would be best to look at this now?
Look, I think the early demand is going to come from those businesses that are trying to decarbonise and are really struggling to electrify. And so we're seeing sectors like those businesses that need a really high combustible heat, they can't electrify. And so that's the construction of steel, cement, glass, a lot of those ceramics, a lot of those construction materials. We also see manufacturing of products that need that gaseous molecule as a feedstock. So that's pharmaceuticals, plastics, chemicals, and explosives. So those sorts of industries really don't have an alternative. But when we get out and start speaking to more and more businesses, we're hearing stories about paper processing, where they need, it's only a 200-degree heat, but the amount of fuel that's required to dry out the paper, they end up using a lot more fuel as an electron than as a molecule. And so that's driving up their costs and actually even driving up their emissions as well when they're using electricity off the current grid with coal. So lots of businesses out there that are going to need this.
I didn't hear you talk about commercial buildings because it's one that we have been working with for quite some time and talking about electrification. But we know it's not a fait accompli to electrify. They often have quite tight, serious space constraints. The equipment is only used, certainly in Sydney, it's only used for heating like 10% of the hours a year, a couple of thousand hours a year at most. And maybe there's some electrical constraints as well.
Yeah.
Yet we look at the neighbours, GBCA, that's not really enabling usage of biomethane.
Yeah.
What needs to change? And are you seeing that from customers saying, yes, in the commercial space we need it as well? Yeah,
absolutely. We're hearing lots of stories similar to that in the commercial space. In terms of why it's not there at the moment, I think because legislation has only recently changed. So in terms of a business being able to buy that green certificate and having it actually reduce their emissions, that's only been available since the 1st of July last year. So it's very recent, and I think Neighbours, Green Star, Climate Active, all of those energy rating systems, they just need to catch up. They need to understand the potential for biomethane to reduce emissions and just build it into their ratings system and treat it equally to renewable electricity.
Interesting you say that. I think consultants need to catch up as well. We see that when a building says, I need to decarbonise, it's electrify. I'm yet to see that.
I think there's just a lack of awareness.
Yep.
You know, those of us that are, you know, in and around the industry, we look overseas and we see the huge potential in what's happening overseas. And we need to get that word out here. We need to help educate people about the really valuable role that biomethane can play in decarbonising, you know, commercial businesses and industrial businesses.
You mentioned overseas.
Yes.
Let's go there.
Yeah.
May make us feel like we're quite a fair way behind, but tell us,
We are.
where are at, what's happening overseas, and what are some of those policies that are helping biomethane scale?
Yeah, well, we're seeing thriving markets across Europe, the US, and Asia. If we look to Europe, we have Denmark is already sitting at about 40% of biomethane in their gas network. They're aiming for 100%. It was 2035, and they've actually brought it back to 2030. That they will have 100% of renewable gas in their gas network. Ireland's aiming for 2045 to be 100%. In terms of the policies, when we look across the 6 top producing countries, so that's Denmark, Sweden, the UK, France, Ireland, Italy, the policies that they all have in common, they all have set a target that they're aiming towards, which is really important for sending that long-term investment signal. They all have demand-side incentives. So what that means is on the customer side, they have an incentive to decarbonise. And if they don't, it's going to cost them financially. And then on the supply side, there's supply-side support that's provided to help reduce that cost for producers and, you know, reduce the price that they need to sell their product at to market. So it's a mixture of all those 3 sorts of policies.
And it feels like we've sort of got a little bit of each of those in some of our jurisdictions at the moment.
So we've got here, you know, we've got the safeguard mechanism, but that only applies to, you know, the top level of polluters. We are starting to see pressures coming from cost of debt and insurance premiums, where in terms of that rating on a company, if they don't have a credible transition pathway, then the banks and the debt providers are saying, well, hold on, if you're not contributing to emission reduction, you're potentially causing the problem. We're going to charge you a high level of interest, or we're going to increase your insurance premium. So we're starting to see some financial pressures on businesses.
So let's talk a little bit about policy. Let's bring it back locally. Pull out the magic wand. I'll give you one policy. Just the one for local, because local is the issue. Local, state and federal, what's could you name one, or is it needs a suite, obviously, but what's the top priority maybe
look,
then?
It does. I think, look, we're already seeing the game changing in New South Wales and the change in investment decision making in New South Wales, that supply side support. So really helping provide financial support to the producers and to these early movers to help them bring their product to market. That would probably be the number one, but to back that up, there needs to be a long-term signal because they need to be backed by investors and the investors need to know that this is a long-term solution that they can recover their investment. So a policy, whether it's a target with financial funding or some sort of signal that gives that long-term signal as well with that financial support.
Targets in Victoria, what have we got? There's some settings there coming on?
Yeah, so the Victorian government consulted on that early last year, sort of Christmas the year before, and planned to make some announcements before the Christmas just gone. It has been delayed, and so we're waiting to see what they come out with.
Okay.
So there's potential in Victoria.
Yeah, well, we're seeing policy fall into place and the foundations are there for the industry. Where are we in 5 years' time then?
Well, I can tell you where New South Wales aim to be. With their renewable fuel scheme that they announced, they've actually set a target of having 15% of industrial use decarbonised by 2035. Their scheme kicks into place in about 2027 and 2028. So 2035 is their target for 15% reduction. With lack of policy in the other states, it's hard to say where we'll be in 5 years' time, but I'd like to think, even though they're lagging behind New South Wales, maybe by 2035 they're sitting at close to 10% decarbonised.
Okay.
Yes.
The other states lagging behind. I mean, it seems like Victoria, New South Wales at the forefront there. Queensland putting some money in to try and help with R&D and what have you as well, I understand.
Yeah, and they are investing in projects. So I do know of some other projects that are getting government support. What New South Wales have done, have come out with this holistic package. It's this renewable fuel strategy that has 20 actions. And there's funding for projects, but there's funding for research, there's looking at the supply chain. There's a whole of system approach to the New South Wales approach, which is fantastic. And it's sending that signal as well to investors. Queensland, you can apply to government and you can get grants, access to grants. And we're seeing movement in South Australia as well. There are a number of projects in South Australia that we'll be hearing announcements on soon as well. So other states are moving. There's just not the visible policy support.
Feels like momentum is building.
We're getting there. It is absolutely building.
Yeah,
and at the federal level as well. So the federal level is currently in discussions about national policy.
Fabulous. And what is the role of distributors and retailers alike in this whole transformation?
Well, look, for gas distributors, it's about how do we keep the cost as low as possible for transporting that gas. That's the role of a distributor, is just to move the molecule from where it's supplied to where it's needed. So keeping that cost as low as possible is the role of the distributor. The role of the retailer is to provide that product to market. So we are seeing, we hear more and more stories about commercial businesses. I was speaking to a dry cleaner yesterday, and they've got a large dry cleaning business, multiple sites. And electrification is just not a viable option for them. And so in some cases it's because they've got assets that still have a 10 or 15 year life on them. So, they don't want to replace that yet. In others, the cost of, they can do a heat pump to heat their water, but for the ironing and the steaming, they can't find the technology that's economically viable for them. So we're hearing many of these stories, but they buy their gas through a retailer. So if they want biomethane, they've got nowhere to go at the moment to buy it. So retailers' jobs are to understand that demand and provide that product.
Okay, good to hear, good to hear. So we've got a developing biomethane industry.
Yeah.
Is there a risk if customers don't put out? Is that going to
There is a huge demand that's coming from Southeast Asia. So those sort of smaller island nations like Singapore, Japan and South Korea that don't have the land space to create their own renewable energy, they are wanting to buy it from here. So we're seeing a lot of international investors coming and speaking to producers here wanting to export that product. And they've got a pretty high willingness to pay. So the risk is if those producers don't see local demand, they'll sell their product overseas.
And we lose
it.
Economic multiplier effect of utilising that gas, upgrading our raw materials and creating productivity and value add.
Yeah, we'll still get to upgrade the raw materials, but it'll be sold overseas. And once they're sold, they'll be locked into long-term contracts. So once it's gone, it's gone.
Why can they pay so much more overseas?
Because their governments are leaning in and subsidising it.
The biomethane, to say, we're going to pay a lot more to get biomethane, bring it into the country.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's not, you talk about social licence so often. If all of a sudden we're seeing whether it be subsidies go in and any sort of help for an industry, and that industry just goes and helps overseas and not local jobs.
But we're already seeing a change with New South Wales announcing their policy and that support in New South Wales. We're already seeing investors go, that works for us. We would be willing to invest in the New South Wales market because that's a price that is satisfactory for us. But maybe the other states will go overseas.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's the risk.
Okay, well let's hope sanity prevails.
Let's hope.
And we look after our local jobs and value add first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Suzie, let's just dive in and I know you're not a retailer, so you can't give a hard number right now to say this is how much it is for biomethane per gigajoule. But tell me about the cost dynamics and where we're placed and what's happening there.
So biomethane, I guess there's the cost of the commodity itself, and then there's a green premium because it is helping to reduce emissions. Yep. I often get asked the question of, well, how does it compare to the cost of natural gas? I would coach people to think about not in terms of that because that's not the decision businesses are making. Businesses are wanting to decarbonise, and so what's the cost of biomethane compared to their alternatives? So firstly, that's a slightly different framing I think businesses need to think about. And then in terms of that cost, whilst there is a marginal increase compared to the cost of natural gas, it is a cost they can manage because, if they're using this much gas and they start to decarbonise this part of it, that increased cost, when actually spread across their entire gas use, becomes a very minimal cost increase to their business over time.
Okay. So look at this holistically, and you've got to compare it against a lot of different options and things here.
Yeah.
And when we talk about comparing against different options, that's also a case for policy as well. Right now we're seeing a lot of money going into transmission and all this long-term storage for the electrification, electricity network and what have you. We keep finding ourselves coming back with electrification. Is what do we do middle of winter when we struggle with solar and there's no wind?
Yeah.
Like, just how expensive is that last 10-20% to electrify?
Hugely expensive and mind-baffling in my mind, in that you've got existing infrastructure that's sitting there. We should just be using the existing infrastructure rather than building out, a huge amount more that customers at the end of the day are going to have to pay for. So, I do believe we need both electrons and molecules to be decarbonised, but let's use the existing infrastructure. From that seasonality point of view, though, in winter, when the sun's not shining and definitely not strong enough to produce, the volumes of energy that's required, the wind's not blowing, in a net zero world, what is going to be producing that electricity? It's going to be gas-powered generation. So if you take something that is being powered by gas now and you electrify that, it's still going to be powered by gas, in those winter months. So you've got to question the value of building out the infrastructure required for that, for no emission reduction benefit.
And when you say using the existing infrastructure, that's our gas network.
That's gas network.
I always, the first time you let me know that, who owns that gas network, it's actually not Jemena, it's like Australians own it.
Australians own the infrastructure.
There's an agreement between Australian citizens and Jemena to say, well, you go and build it and we're going to pay for you over time. So it's ours. It's like,
it is.
This is our infrastructure.
So use it. Yeah, use it. Absolutely.
We talk electrification, and again, that's a lot of what A2EP does and supports. And we see certainly in many cases for heat pumps where it's really economically viable. But we're also seeing cases where you may be able to do 10% electrification. But when you trigger that electrical upgrade, all of a sudden the electrification model really flips pretty quickly to being not so
It can, because there might need to be an upgrading of the switchboard. They might need to build out the capacity for it. So those are additional costs that really aren't factored into a lot of the discussions, and that's got to be part of the decision making for a business.
And I guess we're saying biomethane, 5%. We go to 10, we go to 15, 20. It does allow that incremental and matching with targets.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good. Yeah. I think this is we've got to balance the equation. But we couldn't do this 5 years ago because we didn't have everything in place to support the market.
And I think we're just learning a lot more. Like, often policy is set looking at this sort of macroeconomic model with a whole lot of simplifying assumptions. This all started back 25, 26 years ago, back in 2000, when the government started putting in place renewable electricity targets and started stimulating the market then with this view of we are the land of sunshine. Not as much today, case in point, but we're the land of sunshine. Surely we can just power everything through solar. But as we get down to the practical reality of it, we start to see that that solution isn't necessarily the right solution for everyone or for their entire business. As you say, we speak to a lot of customers who say, look, I can electrify maybe 70, even 80% of my business, but there's a part of the business I can't. What do I do? How do I decarbonise that? And that's where biomethane can play that role and support them.
Yeah, really going to be complementary.
Yeah,
it's not an either or. Let's work these together.
Yeah.
Excellent. Maybe let's finish off with a little bit about what's next. Or what are we looking for in the next few months or this year then? 2026, how do we need to get some more momentum going?
I think what would really help is raising the customer voice. So customers calling up their retailers and telling them they want it. Retailers understanding and going out and proactively as well, asking their customers what they want. So really creating that demand signal, I think, is really important. The supply's there. There are a lot of producers out there in the market that are all investigating feedstock, all have the technology on hand that want to bring the product to market. So I think the supply is there and waiting. What we need now is the offtake.
We need the energy users, the gas users now, to be putting up their hand and saying, hey, let me know what's available with biomethane. What can I get here?
Yep.
And do you need to go all or nothing? Do they need to say, oh, I'm now getting 100 TJs a year of natural gas? Is it, okay,
No,
it's got to be 100
No,
now?
absolutely not. Like we're seeing, the beauty of this is this can be a gradual solution. They can slowly be replacing their gas use with biomethane use over time.
So it links in with their targets.
Yeah,
then.
it links in with their targets.
If we've got a 40% by 2030,
Yep.
bang, you can bring that into the target.
Absolutely.
They just
Yep,
got to put their hand up.
It's in their control, which enables them to manage their costs as well.
Okay, well, I'll put that out there to the energy consultant network, certainly that we work with, and those end users, energy users, putting their hand up and ask those retailers, where is the biomethane? We're getting ready. How do we fit this into our targets?
Yep.
Excellent. Suzie Jakobovits, thank you so much for joining us on the Energy Exchange podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jarrod.